I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Over, up. Wait. Or up.
Good evening. I'm Muriel Bowser. I'm the mayor of Washington, D.C., and I'm calling to order the Constitutional Convention for the 51st state. I want to acknowledge all of the members of the Statehood Convention, the Statehood Commission's co-chair, council member and chairman of the council, Phil Mendelson. I thought this was the Statehood Convention. I also want to acknowledge Senator Paul Strauss, the senior senator, and Senator Michael Brown, and Senator Franklin Garcia. And without objection from the members of the commission, I want to turn to two of our speakers first to kick off our constitutional convention. Everyone should have an agenda and see what is in store for us today. We will be talking about the proposed boundaries of the federal, of the proposed boundaries of the new state. We will talk about the rules of engagement for our 3-day constitutional convention, and that will be presented by our parliamentarian, Dean Shelley Broderick. Catherine stuck a new name in there, Dean Broderick. And then we will have democracy speeches. We're going to get 2 of those speeches in advance of the other presentations. And the first one is going to be from our warrior on the Hill and our congresswoman, who is going to talk to us about the importance of this process and the importance of the advisory referendum and the importance of the push that we are making now for statehood. Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton.
Thank you very much, Mayor Muriel Bowser. First, my apologies that literally as I speak, I'm supposed to be speaking somewhere else. But this is where I had to be this evening. Our applause for Mayor Bowser, our D.C. Statehood delegation, our D.C. Statehood Commission, and our D.C. City Council. They deserve your applause and hurrahs for the Constitutional Convention they have called to add muscle and attention to our efforts to hasten statehood for the residents of the nation's capital. I urge us to make the most of this effort and even to put away your perfectionist instincts. Amen. Look, it takes one to know one. Don't sweat too many of the details. Remember, most Americans are ignorant of the big D.C. picture and what we don't have. Now, many residents, I understand, want a different process, a better process, just as I often want a different bill and a better bill on the floor. I need more congressional allies, I tell myself. I need more D.C. residents over here, I say. But I am compelled to seize the opportunity that appears. This opportunity is timed for the general election and the election of a new president and a new Congress, and we never needed a new Congress more than we do this November. Remember, this opportunity may not come again for what, 4 years? In Congress, we are compelled to seize much smaller vehicles for our quest for statehood with Republicans in charge of the House and the Senate. For example, there's a D.C. statue in the Capitol that is permitted only for states. Another small example, the D.C. flag must be flown by the military when flags of the states are flown by the military. My friend, that doesn't get us close to statehood. That's what we're trying to do here this evening. Today's constitutional convention is much larger and more visible. The mere announcement of this statehood convention generated national attention to statehood that we have not seen in years. So this may not be your launching pad, but like it or not, it is already a launching pad that has the potential to stimulate and re-energize statehood efforts and the statehood movement itself. All elected officials, alongside our citizens. To be sure, in recent years, we have succeeded each year in breaking the previous year's record for sponsors and co-sponsors of the D.C. statehood bill. We now have most Democrats original co-sponsors, which mean they are sponsors with me. But I got news for us all. Democracy is not generated from within the Congress by members of Congress. Democracy only comes from outside that chamber where I serve. The House of Representatives has recently been threatened by D.C.'s boldness after we overwhelmingly passed a budget autonomy referendum. 2 weeks ago, on the very same day, the House passed not one, but 2 provisions to eliminate your D.C. budget autonomy referendum. They were really threatened. In the morning, an appropriation committee embedded a rider overturning the referendum in the D.C. appropriation bill. In the afternoon, Republicans passed identical language on the House floor on a standalone bill. See what they're doing?
Yes.
They doubled down because they do not have the votes in the Senate. They are trying desperately to take from you one of the most important ingredients of statehood, D.C. budget autonomy. And they're trying to do this after the only court decision on record has upheld your budget autonomy referendum. So as far as I'm concerned, D.C. has already shown it can threaten Congress, because I've never seen Congress move like this on an action taken by D.C. before. You move boldly to pass your own budget, and I thank the mayor and the city council chairman, and you're submitting it to Congress using your own D.C. budget autonomy referendum, and you got the House's attention. Your constitutional convention and November vote on statehood may not seem to be the same immediate threat. But coming so close on to your D.C. budget autonomy referendum, D.C. is showing fortitude and continuing determination. But if democracy does not originate in the Congress, it does not come at all until Congress itself feels threatened by democratic forces outside the Congress. This week, with this constitutional convention, we can help break through my own greatest frustration in Congress. Not that the Republican Congress won't grant D.C. statehood, but that their constituents and most Americans think we already have the same rights they have according to all the polls. When I was first elected to Congress, the House had been controlled by my party for 40 years, the Senate for nearly as long. Speaker Tom Foley gave me the right to go to the House floor with our statehood bill. Almost 2/3 of the Democrats and 1 Republican actually voted for statehood. We tooled up then to reach statehood within a few years. Alas, we lost the Congress, and Democrats have held it only a few years since. And D.C. itself, right after the statehood vote, had to have a control board to recover its solvency. Today, the District of Columbia has a $2 billion surplus, and we are the envy of the entire nation. We pay the highest federal taxes per capita, per resident, of any Americans living in any state. Today's Constitutional Convention must clear the path for a brand new effort for D.C. statehood. There can be no more pauses, no more ups followed by downs, no more episodic fights, no more delegated home rule that Congress takes back at will, piece by piece, law by law. This time, beginning with this convention, we must pledge to build a formidable movement, first here and then nationwide. And this time, we must not stop until the District of Columbia becomes the 51st state of the United States of America.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you. Let's give a shout for Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton. And next up, we're going to hear from Neera Tanden, and she is the president and CEO of the Center for American Progress and the Center for American Progress Action Fund. And she also represents Secretary Clinton on the Platform Drafting Committee. Let's hear it for Neera Tanden.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor for me to be here representing Secretary Clinton, who I worked for many, many years. And it's great to be here with Mayor Bowser, who I saw and who spoke at our first platform committee meeting and talked about the importance of D.C. statehood and so many other important issues. And I really want to thank the members of the convention. As a D.C. resident, I have to say I am all in on this fight, and it's critical that we're all here. Really, I'm here to speak on behalf of Secretary Clinton and to really say how critical the issue of D.C. statehood really is. Something we lose sight of is that D.C. is the only capital in the world that doesn't have voting rights. The only capital in the world. And when we're talking about democracy, when we're talking about the right to vote, the protections every American should have, we have to remind our friends around the country that we have this injustice here in D.C. And so Hillary, as a D.C. resident, as was First Lady, as someone who's worked in the district, as senator, as a person who's been our friend and champion, not just in this campaign, but for years, she recognizes that this is part and parcel of our commitment to voting rights for true democracy for all Americans. And so she has taken a strong stand on voting and other issues, but truly taken a strong stand on voting here in the district and representation for all D.C. residents. So I'm honored to be here and speak on her behalf in terms of this issue, but we also have to recognize that this is part of a discussion we need to have about voting rights in the country, because truly voting rights are under assault, not just in one state or another state, but in states across the country. We are facing an unprecedented assault on the right to vote, a vote that our friends, our neighbors, our grandparents, people bled for that right, and it's being restricted in cities and towns. People don't want to have a true democracy because they're scared of what a true democracy will mean for them. The same forces we're facing that are trying to restrict D.C. autonomy, D.C. voting rights, are the same forces in the Congress and in the states that are trying to restrict the right to vote. And Hillary recognizes that. She recognizes that this is an assault on democracy around the country. And so that's why she has placed D.C. voting rights at the heart of her democracy agenda, one that calls for things like that should be easy, like voting. Automatic voting registration should be something we think about, discuss, actually happen. Efforts to purge voting lists shouldn't happen in America in the 21st century. We need to end that practice. The idea that people need to restrict voting for so-called fraud that doesn't exist, something that's made up as a tactic to stop people from exercising this most basic protection that is the most basic protection for all our rights. So I'm excited about the importance of this process. I'm excited about the prospect of D.C. having a true representation in our government, and I'm excited about a conversation that we have in the country over the coming months about D.C., about representation here in D.C., but also about voting and the importance of voting around the country. These are all issues connected together. People want to pull them apart, but it's our job to recognize how integrated these are, how our rights are affected by rights being restricted across the country. And when rights are restricted across the country, it affects us. And in that way, we can make sure that we actually bring the change we've been working on for so many years. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here to represent Hillary, and hopefully we'll have a good day tomorrow and in the coming months.
Thank you. Thank you, Neera Tanden. So I thought we have one more of our democracy speakers who I see in front of me, and without objection from the commissioners, I thought I would invite him up next if he's ready. Pat Mayer, are you ready? Okay, so next up we're going to hear from the Executive Director of the DC GOP. Give him a big round of applause.
This is the more solemn portion of the evening. First of all, thanks for the opportunity to say a few words here tonight. This is all very exciting. I'd first of all like to start by, on behalf of the D.C. Republican Party, thanking Mayor Bowser and all the Statehood Commission for their participation tonight, and of course all of you as well. I think you'll agree, regardless of your political affiliation, district residents, and you've heard this over and over and over again, we're all in the same boat together, and that we're second-class citizens here in the United States. And this is something that recently has become even more noticeable for me because I have two very young children, one born 8 weeks ago and another coming up on 3 years old. And they were, they were born here in the District of Columbia. So I was not born in the District of Columbia. So when I was 18, I voted. Through my whole life, I could vote for president and everything else, and Congress. I could have representation, and we had a state government. And so it actually mattered. But for my two sons, it's not that way. And so obviously this is something we have to do something about. As you may know, the D.C. Republican Party has long supported and advocated for full voting representation, along with budget and legislative autonomy. We've spent a lot of time walking the halls of Congress over the years. Some years have been better than others. Our toughest work, though, this cycle in 2016 has to do with the platform at the Republican National Convention. As you may recall, during the 2012 Republican National Convention Platform Committee, the then Republican National Committee man from Indiana inserted extremely negative language into the national RNC platform that states, "We oppose statehood for the District of Columbia." So that is actually in the national platform. That was done by one individual, just out of the blue. Nobody was ready for it. So this is obviously something we're trying to get ahead of this cycle. D.C. Republicans, particularly our platform committee representatives, Chip Nottingham and Rachel Hoff, will work to remove that awful language during the 2016 platform process, which takes place a week before the Republican National Convention. While I've already had informal conversations with RNC staff who are on the platform committee and the Trump campaign, we will in the coming days have more formal discussions about how we remove that language from the platform. And quite frankly, this is probably the best we can hope for this cycle. This is probably one of the more challenging cycles for us on the Republican side. But I'd like to, again, on behalf of D.C. Republicans, I'd like to thank all of you for your participation today, and thank you for the opportunity for me to say a few words.
Thank you. So we want to offer all of our assistance to the DC GOP in moving that out of your platform, just as we have conducted outreach with the Democratic platform committees. We will do the same with the Republican platform committee. So now let me go back to the agenda in item 6 and hear from the commissioners as we get started. Chairman Mendelson.
Thank you, Mayor Bowser, and good evening. It's a real pleasure to be here. I think this is a great occasion. I'm going to just make a couple of remarks in addition to the speakers, and I thought each of those who've already spoken have made most of the points, and especially our Congressman, Eleanor Holmes Norton. I have long said that the citizens of the District of Columbia are entitled to the same rights and responsibilities as the citizens of the United States. And the only way that we get that is by having statehood. Ms. Tannen was a little bit off when she said that we are the only nation's capital that doesn't have representation in the national legislature. My recollection is that there are a couple others, like North Korea. But it does make the point that in the free world, and in fact most of the world, the nation's capital is not disenfranchised as we are. And so this is an important civil rights effort on our part. And I think also, and I want to compliment the mayor for pushing this strategy, for coming up with and pushing this strategy, that with a new president and a new Congress in the new year, that we have a new opportunity to be pushing statehood. And that's why we are about this work today and actually for the next couple of months. So thank you all for your attendance and for being here. Thank you, Mayor Bowser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Strauss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a particular honor and privilege for me to be here tonight. In 1796, the citizens of the state of Tennessee, having failed in their attempts to gain statehood, came up with a new plan. They passed a constitution. The territorial legislature declared the territorial governor to be the governor. And because back in the day it was legislatures that selected their senators, the territorial legislature elected 2 United States senators who got on their horses, rode up to the Capitol, presented themselves at the door of the 4th Congress, and demanded to be seated as the new senators from the state of Tennessee. The doorkeeper of the Capitol, not quite sure what to do with them, actually put seats out on the floor of the Senate where Tennessee's admission was debated and ultimately settled, and the Tennessee Plan was born. Rather than waiting for congressional permission to secure your rights as a state, the citizens of Tennessee embarked on a plan that was copied by the citizens of Oregon, Michigan, California, and most recently in the 20th century, the territory of Alaska adopted a similar plan, adding a shadow representative to their statehood delegation to become the 49th state of the United States. We have tried seeking legislation from Congress. We have tried other strategies, and we have even tried implements and elements of the Tennessee Plan, but not all at the same time and not quite in this way, and not quite with the historic opportunity that is being presented to us, we believe and hope, by this historic national election. I want to credit our chair, Mayor Bowser, for leading us on this initiative, from our commemoration of Emancipation Day to our releasing of this draft Constitution at the Lincoln Cottage. I have heard many comments from many citizens. And if we have accomplished nothing but engaging our citizens in an energetic effort at statehood, this has been a success. But I have a feeling that this is going to be more than just that. I think we are on the path to the final trajectory that will put us where we need to be as the 51st state. No document is going to be all things to all people. No language will be perfect the first time. Our own Constitution of the United States was a second draft after our Articles of Confederation failed to meet the needs of the people. And so there is precedent for maybe not getting it right the first time, but getting it right eventually and moving on. I look forward to hearing from our other distinguished speakers tonight, as well as every resident of the District of Columbia. It is exciting to be part of a constitutional convention that, by my historical research, is literally the most democratic convention in history. Literally any citizen can be here tonight and be credentialed as a delegate to this convention, can speak on that Constitution, and even if you're not here physically in the room, we are taking advantage of the technology that our forefathers did not have. So whereas the United States drafters of the Constitution were reduced to the use of quill pens, and even our 82 Constitution was written mostly on typewriters, we tonight will be tweeting and logging in online and reviewing using all of the resources and exciting tools of the 21st century. And it is a humbling experience to be part of this truly historic occasion. I thank everyone for being here. I thank the mayor for her leadership. I thank the chairman for his leadership in creating the new Columbia Statehood Commission so that the delegation and the other institutions of government leaders can work on a plan to unite our strategies for statehood. And I want to thank all of the staff and volunteers that have worked so hard to get us here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me just start by saying that I've been involved in this process now for a couple of months. It's been approximately 2 months since we started this. I've seen more enthusiasm and more action towards statehood in the past 2 months than I've seen at any other time in the 10 years that I've been in this position. I've met on several occasions with people, including activists, and I know there are concerns about this process. If I want you to know that I've heard those concerns, and I'll try my best to make sure, as part of the commission, that this process is as open and transparent and as inclusive as absolutely possible. If you've come to the town hall meetings, you know that I've been a vocal critic about a few things, primarily funding and other things that I think need to go into this process. But this is not a perfect process. But we must keep our eyes on the prize here. We need to get this referendum on the ballot, and we need to get it passed, and we have much to do. We need to write a new constitution, we need to make sure it's passed, and we need to get it on the ballot. And I encourage everybody not to kill the good in search of the perfect. This is not a perfect process. We'll do our best to make it as inclusive and as democratic as we can, but we're working in a very short period of time here. And I think that this is our time. You know, Ecclesiastes tells us that to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven, and I think this is our time. We have a president who said, I'm for it. We have presidential candidates who both support it. Bernie Sanders is a co-sponsor of the Statehood bill that's now on Capitol Hill, and Secretary Clinton, my candidate, said that I will fight for it. So now's the time for us to move. You know that Rosa Parks was not the first person to refuse to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. But with great courage and conviction, she did it at the right time, and that's what we need to do. We need to seize this moment and use that same courage and conviction to get to the end of this process, make sure we get this passed as well as we can do it, and get it on the ballot in November. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Congressman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yesterday we woke up to horrible news. And as we learned more and more and put faces to some of the victims that we saw, it became more and more, it hit closer, you know. And in my case, I even had a friend that perished yesterday. And so if I may, Madam Chair, ask for a minute of silence to honor all the victims that were killed yesterday. Thank you. That was a minute. So our thoughts and prayers are obviously with the people of Orlando, the victims and the family and friends of all those that are going through this horrific situation, and really for our nation as well. Now, I'm just very excited to be here and remind people that tomorrow is election. I think I'm the only one whose name is going to show up, so I think that's one of the reasons why you don't see, more excited about this. So I'll be on the ballot tomorrow, so please go out and vote. We're hoping to tomorrow put a poster of the 2 days that are left for the convention in front of every precinct in the city so that we can get a large crowd. I'm actually very excited to see so many people show up. I actually saw on television the Libertarian Party's national convention, and I don't think it was any greater than this is. Mm-hmm. So this is a good measure that we're doing well. This is very, very exciting. I have, though I participated in some way or another in conventions, I've never attended one. So this is my first one. I'm very, very happy to be here. What we're here for is to hope that you all help us make this process better by improving the draft Constitution. I know that we've gotten a bunch of comments from a lot of people through emails, by the town halls that we hosted, every possible way. On the streets we get approached, and so we just hope that that process continues tonight and that we can actually improve, make it more perfect. That's the idea. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative. Okay, I'm going to reserve my comments, and I think we should get on to it. So item 7 is a presentation on the proposed boundaries from the Director of the D.C. Office on Planning, Eric Shaw.
Good evening, members of the New Columbia Statehood Commission and delegates. My name is Eric Shaw, and I am the Director of the District of Columbia Office of Planning and a resident of the District of Columbia. My staff and I have been working closely with Commission staff to delineate the proposed boundaries of the state of New Columbia and the federal seat of government. We have delineated the proposed boundaries based on the following principles: that all residences within New Columbia will exist outside the federal seat of government. The only residence located within the federal seat of government will be the White House. The seat of operations for federal cabinet, congressional, and federal judicial offices, along with prominent federal monuments and memorials, will be located within the federal seat of government. There is an exception to this principle that I will note later. The proposed boundaries of New Columbia and the federal seat of government will be based on review of boundaries defined and established planning precedents. The borders of the District of Columbia are delineated by boundary stones laid in 1791 and 1792. These stones are spaced every mile and define a 10-mile by 10-mile square. I have attached to my written remarks a spreadsheet detailing the GPS coordinates of each of the stones. In 1846, the land located west of the Potomac River was retroceded to the Commonwealth of Virginia. Today, the borders of the District of Columbia are Eastern Avenue, Western Avenue, Southern Avenue, and the western bank of the Potomac River that lies within the original 10-mile by 10-mile square. 26 of the 40 boundary stones are part of the current boundaries of the District of Columbia. The proposed boundaries for the state of New Columbia will be that of the current boundaries of the District of Columbia, excluding the federal seat of government. We propose that the boundaries for the federal seat of government be based on the planning area defined as the kite area within the McMillan Plan of 1901 and 1902, with some modifications to meet the principles that I detailed earlier. The McMillan Plan is recognized as the planning document that created what we now know as the Monumental Washington. I have attached to my written remarks further background on the McMillan Plan, including a description of the kite area drafted by the State Office of Historic Preservation. Modifications to the planning area defined in the McMillan Plan of 1901 and 1902 to delineate proposed boundaries of the federal seat of government are as follows. Number 1, the adjustment of the boundaries so that the John A. Wilson Building will be located within the state of New Columbia. That is important. The inclusion of the Kennedy Center within the boundaries of the federal seat of government. The Kennedy Center is a prominent memorial erected in honor of President John F. Kennedy. An adjustment of the southwest boundary to follow the alignment of Interstate 395, and the exclusion of an area identified by the National Capital Planning Commission Southwest Eco District Plan, published in January 2013. This area is bounded by Independence Avenue to the north, Main Avenue to the south, 12th Street to the west, and 4th Street to the east. This 15-block planning area includes 8 federal buildings, 8 private buildings, and 3 federal parks. The federal government has recently initiated efforts to redevelop the properties in the planning area for non-governmental and residential uses. I have attached to my written remarks a description of the boundaries of the federal seat of government and a map showing the boundaries. The Office of Planning looks forward to continuing to support the Commission on this historic effort.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Thank you. Thank you. Before you take your seat, Director Shaw, let me see if any members of the Commission have any questions.
Director, I noticed looks like there's another enclave pocket.
Yes, sir.
On the north part, where I believe it now houses the OAS.
That's correct.
The Red Cross. Are there any residences in that area? And what was the rationale for excluding that?
So that would be part of New Columbia, and that's because there aren't the seats of federal operations there. So the Organization American States, the DAR, and Red Cross would be within New Columbia.
And the Columbia Island, Roosevelt Island are essentially federal now, but they would be in the new state.
That's correct.
And Director, would you identify anything that I think the Eco District was one that you pointed out that would be different from what is attached to Congresswoman Norton's bill?
So that's correct. So in Congresswoman Norton's original bill, it included all of Potomac and Anacostia and Bowling Air Force Base, and then also had a carve-out for the Navy Yard at that time. And so because we had the principle that all residences, which include the residences on Bowling Air Force Base, be part of New Columbia, that's why we proposed a change based off the
So those would be the big differences?
That's the big difference, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, so without further questions, thank you, and let's thank the Office of Planning for their support.
Thank you.
I'm sorry?
When will you receive comments on the boundary?
I will receive them during the comment period through the item number 10, citizen testimony and discussion.
But that's limited to specific articles which don't include.
You may ask your question then. And so what I'd like to do is accept the report from the Office on Planning for the Commission's action at the meeting where we'll take up the convention.
So moved.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. And then next up, we're going to talk about the rules of engagement, and I would like to invite Shelley Broderick to the podium.
Thanks, everyone. I am Shelley Broderick, the proud dean of the UDC David A. Clark School of Law, your tax dollars at work.
Yay!
I am also a member of the legal team and the parliamentarian for today. The legal team is made up of law professors, members of law firms, public interest lawyers, folks from the Attorney General's office, the DC Council, and the mayor's office. And we developed guiding principles which assisted or guided our work. And there are 7. You have them in the Constitution, constitutional document that you have, but they were to promote stability by maintaining the district's basic current governing structure, build upon the work of statehood efforts in the 80s, but simplify and modernize the Constitution developed then, establish the structure necessary for good government, empower the legislature and executive to govern in the interests of the people who elect them, produce orderly and responsible governance, reflect the values of district residents, and demonstrate that the district merits congressional admission as a state. Those are the guiding principles. We worked closely around those every day of this effort. I also want to tell you a little bit about the process that resulted in the draft, and I emphasize draft, Constitution. As you've heard, May 6th, the draft Constitution was announced at the Lincoln Cottage, and it has been widely disseminated. Input has been solicited across the city in town halls. Comments have been submitted on the website. More than 250 comments have already been received. Committees have been working. Public hearings have been held and will be held, and now we have the Constitutional Convention. This convention will have, like Gaul, 3 parts. First, tonight we'll be dealing with Article 1, the legislative branch, and Article 6, the initiative, referendum, and recall. June 17th at Wilson High School, go Tigers. My daughter's a Tiger. Article 2, the executive branch. Article 4, budget and financial management. And Article 5, borrowing. That's a snoozer, but you should, show up for that one. And on June 18th, Article 3, the judicial branch. Article 7, miscellaneous and transition. And Article 8, transfer of offices. So what was the process? It will go on. The commission will consider amendments at a date to be noticed very shortly. The mayor will submit to the council the next draft of the Constitution by June 30th. The D.C. Council presumably will approve. We'll be watching. And then we'll submit a referendum resolution to the Board of Elections July 8th. And the voters, we get to consider the Constitution and other questions on November 8th. So we'll vote whether the council should petition Congress to enact the new Columbia Admission Act. We'll be asked to vote on the constitutional boundaries and request a representative form of government and petition for admission to the Union. So I have one final list of things to tell you, and I apologize. I try to be more interesting normally, but I do want to tell you the rules of engagement. This convention is nonpartisan, and attendees must respect all views. So no catcalls. 2, the commissioners of the new Columbia Statehood Commission will chair all the sessions. Each session has the topics I described. Number 3, all Washington, D.C. residents are delegates. You've got your badge to demonstrate that. Number 4, testimony will follow the rules established in the public engagement process adopted by the new Columbia Statehood Commission. Individuals will have 3 minutes to testify, and organizations will have 5 minutes. Delegates may also submit written testimony up to 3 pages for individuals and up to 5 pages for organizations. 5, an individual can testify 1 time each session. 6, all comments will be given equal weight for review by the new Columbia Statehood Commission. 7, online testimony will be given equal weight to in-person testimony. 8, the ultimate decision on all amendments and comments will be that of the new Columbia Statehood Commission by majority vote. And finally, final approval of the Constitution will be determined by the voters on November 8th. I am so pleased to be part of this as a card-carrying member of the Statehood Party since 1980. I came here when the Vietnam War was waging and my brother had just been very badly wounded. And I wanted to seek the redress of my grievances about that war, but I didn't have a vote. And I'm ready to get that vote right now. We need to get rid of assault weapons, for example. Right. So thank you.
Thank you, Dean Broderick. Okay, so now we're going to return to our democracy speeches, and then we will turn to the final item on the agenda. I'm told that Daryl Mock is here. Is Daryl Mock here? Oh, Daryl, okay. And Daryl is the chair of the D.C. Statehood Green Party, and we want to invite him to give a democracy speech.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Statehood Commission. It is truly an honor to be here, to be with my fellow residents and citizens of the District of Columbia as we embark on what is most needed, the movement to make us what legitimate and fully represented in the Congress and in our country. I am indeed honored to be here and to represent the D.C. Statehood Green Party, to do such that, and to say to you that the D.C. Statehood Green Party is absolutely and unequivocally for statehood. Statehood, yes. Statehood and no other intermediary process or construct will suffice. The D.C. Statehood Green Party was formed for this and other purposes, and as such has never wavered on the issue regardless of who was elected in power in D.C., Congress, or the White House. The D.C. Statehood Green Party is proud and pleased that Mayor Bowser has made this issue one of her highest priorities. However, the D.C. State Green Party would also challenge the administration and other champions of statehood to adopt one of the previous versions of the construction of the state that would increase the number of elected representatives well beyond 13, which represents the current representational status that is definitely inadequate as is and would further be insufficient to engage and support the new state. While this issue has been and is vital to the proper representation of D.C. residents in national and global politics, we must not allow the decision to be pushed by unknown agendas and create a plan that would be less empowering to the residents and citizens of the state we so dearly and clearly deserve and demand. Again, the D.C. Statehood Green Party is proud to stand in solidarity with the mayor and this commission on this issue, and we will fight alongside this commission and the mayor and all of the residents and citizens of the District of Columbia until we have achieved statehood. That we represent, the people of the New Columbia represent more than 2/3 of a million people that call our state home. And until we have the right authority and power to run our affairs and govern ourselves as do millions of others in the other 50 states of the United States of America. Similarly, we stand for the end of U.S. colonialism here and around the world. We will fight this fight even to the end that we have enhanced and appropriate representation in our state that reflects a progressive and a responsible distribution of power that ensures all of our residents are cared for, empowered, and fully represented. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. And now I want to introduce a gentleman who helped get us fired up at our Champions for Democracy breakfast on Emancipation Day to deliver the final democracy address on this first day of our Constitutional Convention, the CEO of the Leadership Conference, Wade Henderson. Woo!
Well, thank you, and good evening.
Good evening.
Mayor Bowser, distinguished members of the New Columbia Statehood Commission, residents of the District of Columbia, neighbors and colleagues, it is an honor to be here. I'm Wade Henderson. I'm President and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. The Leadership Conference is the nation's leading civil and human rights coalition, with over 200 national organizations working to build an America as good as its ideals. I'm also honored to be the Joseph L. Rao Jr. Professor of Public Interest Law at the David A. Clark School of Law, University of the District of Columbia, a special privilege to follow my dean here on this illustrious occasion. I want to thank the mayor and this commission for giving me the opportunity to speak today, but more importantly, I want to thank you all for this incredible initiative that you have put together to focus America's attention on the disenfranchisement of D.C. residents in the fundamental right of American citizenship, and that is the right to vote and the right to exercise self-determination on how we use resources of our own to help guide and shape the direction we want to live in. Now, I'm a native Washingtonian. I live in my own neighborhood. I grew up in the Bloomingdale section of Washington. My entire life has been devoted to advancing civil and human rights for all Americans, including those in the District of Columbia. But the greatest frustration I have had as an activist is my inability to achieve for the residents of the District of Columbia and myself what we fight for daily on behalf of Americans all over the country and what we do for democracy around the world. We fight to bring democracy to places like Kabul, Afghanistan, Baghdad, Iraq, but we deny that fundamental right to those residents who live here on the Potomac, and that is simply not right. The rule of our country is very simple. If you don't vote, you don't count. And the truth is, in a circumstance like ours, we exercise the right to vote, but that vote has no meaning in affecting the decisions that Congress imposes upon us because of its dictatorial power that has been granted by an anomaly of the United States Constitution. So let me be very clear. I think we know the facts that have led us to this point and why it is so necessary for us as residents of the district to raise our voices to achieve what we want for others, for ourselves as well. Only we can do that. If we don't exercise the right to lift our voices and to challenge the existing system, no one will do it for us. So we have the destination in our hands. Now, I will say this. The mayor has jump-started this debate along with the members of this commission, by making this a central piece of this administration, and our time is now. We support statehood, not because statehood is some magic vehicle that will achieve the objectives we want. The goal, quite frankly, is citizenship. That's what we are hoping for. We are pushing for the right of full citizenship like other Americans enjoy. But the vehicle for accomplishing that result is statehood. It's the best vehicle available to us. Now, we have pursued other avenues in the past. Unfortunately, those avenues have been thwarted in many instances by the very Congress that we seek now to challenge. So statehood is the best vehicle to accomplish that. Let me speak for just a minute about the draft Constitution which I have seen. As Senator Brown said, it is not the perfect document. I understand that many of you will read this document and will seek changes, and that is understandable, and that is your right. My recommendation, however, is that we go forward with the draft as it currently stands, because we are playing a very important political game that ties our ability to accomplish this result to our ability to bring the resolution up for a vote in November. If we dither too long in trying to create the perfect document, we will not have a process completed in time to meet the constitutional requirement for a vote. Many of the changes that we would want to some of the specific elements of this document can be accomplished after the fact. But if we miss the opportunity that is now available to us to complete this process, it will be our loss. So while I recognize that there are desirable changes that we would want, I am urging you and my fellow citizens to see the bigger picture, to recognize that this moment is unique for us, and that a combination of your local activism coupled with the strategic judgment of this commission can produce a result that takes us from where we are today to where we want to be when the vote for citizenship actually occurs. Remember, the issue is citizenship. Statehood is the best vehicle to accomplish that result. Let us pursue this in earnest. Let us achieve the results that we and our forefathers and foremothers have sought to accomplish for us all along. With that, thank you so much.
So now I think do we have a witness list? Okay. I have a list, and Chris Statehood. Is Chris Statehood here? Am I saying that correctly?
He just walked out.
Oh, we did? Okay. Mark Plotkin.
There we go. Thank you. I am a resident of the District of Columbia for the last 52 years. I came here in 1964 to go to George Washington University, and I've stayed here ever since. I'm from Chicago, where you get to vote more than once on Election Day. I'm here not to talk about the Constitution, but if you were at Ward 4, I think it was Ward 4, was it Ward 4? Ward 4, but to talk about after this Constitution is drafted, I don't want to repeat of what has happened before. First of all, you have to speak truth. Neera Tanden, who was representing Hillary Clinton, when I walked out to ask her, will you make sure that, which the mayor has testified, and the statehood senators have testified, that the word statehood is in the national Democratic platform, she gave me no assurance that the word would actually be in the platform. She double-talked and she evaded. And so we have a obligation to do something before the Constitution is even drafted. Make sure that the word statehood is in the platform at the end of July in the Democratic Committee. And you have to be honest. For the last 2 conventions, I've been to 16 conventions, 11 Democrats and 5 Republicans. Last time, the delegate made sure that the statehood word was not in the platform. We cannot allow that to happen again. And finally, I know the mayor met with Senator Carper. Senator Carper, we cannot have a repeat of what happened last time. There was a hearing. I was at the last hearing in 1993. And Senator Glenn and Senator Sasser, Democrats, supposedly our friends, made sure the bill never went to the Senate. Senator Carper has introduced a bill again, but at the last hearing, he produced not one Democrat to be at the hearing. This is a facade. This is a charade. This is the real politics. We can't allow, once the Constitution is drafted and approved, to have that charade repeated again, where our own friends sell us out. The only person who was there was a Republican who voted against it. And finally, we cannot define defeat as victory. When Congresswoman Norton said 2/3 of the Democrats voted for it in 1993, 2/3 voted for it, why didn't 100% of the Democrats vote for it? Why do we satisfy ourselves with 2/3? Every single Democrat should have voted for it. And finally, we need a president who gives a damn about the place in which we live in. Hopefully, Hillary Clinton will. This president has not. It took him 4 years to put the license plate on, and we need real presidential leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Plotkin. And Jesse Lovell.
Jesse. Hi there. I thank the Commission for having us here tonight again, and obviously I'm going to address my comments mostly to the legislature for our new state. My preference being Douglas, but New Columbia. I'll take a state in any form, for sure. I'd just like to say on the issue of our state legislature that while I do think it should never be forgotten that living in a state, and many of us probably grew up in a state, we do have one advantage in that we have the ability as voters to vote for multiple elected officials, as opposed to your average state where you're voting for perhaps a single representative for your own district and maybe one or two state senators. I'm glad that we get to vote for as many of the council members as we do. That being said, I do think it's an important matter that we increase the size of our legislature, at least a bit larger than it is today. It was stated at the beginning of this process that we should seek to put forward a vanilla constitution, that we should present a document to Congress in our Admission Act that would not prove to be a liability in passing our overall statehood bill. And so I would just suggest that a somewhat larger legislature would help avoid what I think is admittedly an unlikely scenario, but a conceivable scenario in which our opponents in Congress might seize on the fact that we have such a small legislature, 13 members. I personally feel that the 1987 Constitution is a pretty reasonable starting point, maintaining the institution of at-large representation while increasing our numbers and giving voters a similar number, in fact, a slightly larger number of voting options than today. I think it's a good starting point, and we can talk about how and when this should be done in the follow-up on the 18th, where we talk about the amendment process, which is a very important point, but I'll leave that for then. That's all for me. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lovell. Okay, Jean Salon. Is Jean here? Jean Solon. Okay. Josh Birch.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening to the commission. I think people know, well, most of you who know me know my displeasure with this process. I'm not happy with it. That all could be made right if the Constitution includes language that says within 5 years of being admitted as a state, we will hold a real constitutional convention with rules delineated in it. I think that would make a lot of us more comfortable with the process that we're being forced through right now. But tonight's subject, I do think we need to change the name. We're here in Anacostia. Frederick Douglass's house on Cedar Hill is looking down on us right now. And would we rather be named after Christopher Columbus, or would we rather be named after an abolitionist, a suffragist, and a humanitarian? I think we should be called Douglas Commonwealth so that we keep the DC that is for, as a native District of Columbian myself, I'd rather be named Douglas Commonwealth, keep the DC named after him, not after Christopher Columbus, who, as far as I'm concerned, can go away with history. As for the Bill of Rights, we need to get rid of the redundant Bill of Rights from the National Bill of Rights. There's no need to repeat it in our own Bill of Rights. And quite frankly, let's get rid of the Second Amendment. Let that blood be on the hands of the nation and not the residents of the District of Columbia. I think we take out the Second Amendment no matter what, and I think we add in a couple of rights, the right to vote. We have seen an unprecedented assault on voting rights around the country. Let's enshrine the right to vote for all District of Columbians in our Constitution. Let's have freedom from discrimination, which was in our 1982 Constitution. Let's set an example for the nation that we're a just, inclusive democracy, not one that excludes people and looks down on people. And thank you all for having ASL interpreters at this meeting tonight. That is part of this process of being an inclusive democracy. And finally, I think we should have a right to privacy enshrined in our new Constitution and the new Bill of Rights. As for the legislature itself, I think it needs to be much bigger than what our current Constitution has. My preference would be to have a bicameral legislature with the Senate being the size our current council makeup, and having a House with representation for every 20 to 25,000 people. So it's a true representative branch of government. It represents a number of people rather than geographic districts. I also think that all vacancies should only be filled by special election. There should be no appointments to our legislature. All vacancies, no matter what, should be special election. And then I think we need to take out the line item veto for our governor. I think we don't need to have that in the Constitution. I think we can address it legislatively if we want to do it, but I don't think it's something we need in our Constitution. And then finally, I just have a question for the commission is, when are we going to see amendments, and how are the amendments going to be addressed, and who's going to do it publicly? Because I don't know how this is going to change or when it's going to change. Thank you all for participating in this process.
Thank you. Okay, I have a couple of lists. I'm trying to make sure I don't miss anybody. William Brackell? Okay, William.
Good evening. My name is Willem Brackell. I've been a resident of the District of Columbia since I was 7 years old. I attended DC public schools. I'm a graduate of Woodrow Wilson High School. After a career in environmental science and policy, I'm now teaching part-time at American University here in DC. I'd like to congratulate the Statehood Commission on the draft Constitution currently before us. Overall, I think it is an excellent document. However, it falls short in one key respect, and that is its failure to make any mention whatsoever of the natural environment and the need to conserve, manage, and protect that environment for the health and well-being of all Washingtonians. The federal Constitution is also silent on this matter. In the 1780s, the framers did not anticipate the future impact of environmental degradation. But today, we know all too well the destruction of the environment and how it can seriously harm our quality of life and even limit our lifespan. More than 30 of the 50 states have recognized this problem and have amended their state constitutions to include explicit environmental provisions. We, in the 51st state, have a unique opportunity, I think, to create an environmentally aware 21st century Constitution from the get-go, rather than appending environmental principles later as an afterthought. On June 8th, I submitted to the Commission a written statement expanding on the rationale for including the environment in our Constitution. I think it's pretty much self-evident. I will not repeat that here. Instead, what I would like to focus on tonight is what specific environmental wording might be appropriate in our Constitution. A good starting point is to look at what was done not far away in Pennsylvania. The Bill of Rights of this state's Constitution was amended in 1971 to include the following text, quote, "The people have a right to clean air, pure water, and to the preservation of the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. Pennsylvania's public natural resources are the common property of all people, including generations yet to come." As a trustee of these resources, the Commonwealth shall conserve and maintain them for the benefit of all people. End of quote. This is known as the Environmental Rights Amendment. It was passed unanimously in 2 successive sessions of the state legislature, and voters approved it in a 4-to-1 margin.
Thank you,
Now,
Mr. Brackett.
I'm almost done. Thank
Okay.
you. The state Supreme Court affirmed the right to clean air, pure water, was on a par with and enforceable to the same extent as any other right in the Constitution. I think that Pennsylvania's Environmental Rights Amendment can serve as a model for us in the District of Columbia. Virginia also has an alternative way to reach these problems. I defer to the experts as to what the details of the language will be, but I strongly urge that the Commission find a way to incorporate environmental rights and protections in our Constitution. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Would you submit your testimony? May I have it?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Pincus, John Pincus. Okay.
Good evening, friends and neighbors.
Good evening.
Good evening. Governor Bowser. Speaker Mendelson. Good evening.
Good evening.
That's the first suggestion I would like to make, is that the council rename your offices so that journalists and members of the public start using those names. We get out of this mindset of being a city. We are tiny geographically. But, I mean, Rhode Island does dwarf us, I guess, in land area. But we can find allies in Rhode Island. We can find allies. What's the largest state that we outpopulate? Is it Montana? Wyoming?
And Vermont.
Only 2? Okay. All right. Josh, you stole one of the things I wanted to talk about, which is the name. I love the name New Columbia. Unfortunately, North Carolina already has those initials. Well, you're going to have, we're known as DC, okay? That's our nickname. I like Douglas Commonwealth. My suggestion was going to be to open the name up to a naming contest in the schools. I never thought of Douglas Commonwealth. You did. Thank you. But this will get our young folks involved and members of the public, and will develop public investment in the issue. Unfortunately, we swim upstream against a vacuous culture, celebrity culture, all this kind of crap. If we get a naming contest out there that will bring new people into the process, and it won't just fritter away the way all of us did, let it fritter away 20, 30 years ago. And I take responsibility for that too. I was a Statehood Party Central Committee member back then, and we all let it kind of die on the vine because it's not the most important issue for everyone. I mean, just like air is more important than water. You can live without water a lot longer than air, but it is vital, and we're all here. Now, the other problem is I would worry that a huge percentage of DC residents don't even know that we're here tonight, or this room would be packed and overflowing, okay? We need more than just one meeting in Anacostia and then 2 follow-up meetings way the heck over there in Upper Northwest at Wilson High. Let's do those, but let's put some more, convene some more meetings in Ward 5, Ward 7, and so forth, and get more people involved. Because I think we can really get a big sweep going here.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay?
Pincus.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Thank you,
You're
Mr.
welcome,
Pincus. Thank you. Dylan Hughes. Dylan, and following Dylan would be Danae Thomas.
Hello, thank you, Statehood Commission, thank you, delegates. I have something a bit less controversial, but something I still note in the draft constitution, specifically about ANCs, or Advisory Neighborhood Commissions. So, as it stands at the moment, they are solely composed of single-member districts, which for the vast majority of the city works perfectly well. But something that is of unique concern to university students in the district, myself included, I go to Georgetown University, is the fact that oftentimes students who change residence yearly can move across, inadvertently, just through the nature of university housing, can move across those single-member districts and subsequently be disqualified from their seat. And in that sense, then, university students are disenfranchised from some of the most local, most salient representation we have, which is the ANCs. So I would just recommend that the language be changed to either provide an exception for universities, such that university land, university seats in ANCs could be multi-member, or just some multi-member districts exist in general. And second, that those may be less of a concern when we are actually state. I know a lot of my friends decide to stay registered in their home states because they recognize the less powerful, if you will, voting in DC. And so oftentimes it's hard to get that minimum signature requirement, which right now is 5% of those within the district, which can be as high as 100, and I can almost guarantee you there are not that many people there, especially during the signature collecting portion for that. I know a friend of mine is having difficulty getting 20, so I'd recommend perhaps lowering that threshold for students or just in general. Thank you, and just as a brief aside, I rather like Douglas Commonwealth as well.
Thank you, Dylan. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Danae Thomas.
Hello, I'm Danae Thomas, and I am a resident. I live here in D.C. I have a lot of family and friends here. I graduated from college here at Georgetown University. Then after, I worked here and just have my family and working or just in school. I eventually go to law school, but anyway, I like to talk about the Constitution. I did read it, and to me, it seems like it's a lot like the U.S. Constitution. It didn't really stand out to me, and I would also recommend it. It would have more details in it so that each ward can kind of feel like they're a part of it. And like even when I post, Twitter or Instagram post about it, everyone's just like, what is a meeting? Like, what is the commission? What is that? And so for someone like me who lived here my entire life and went to school here and no one knew about this meeting or even the student, because Georgetown University is large for political science, and everyone's coming here to Washington, D.C. to be a part of what's going on here, and for no one to know about it, it was kind of sad. And so, I just really hope that this goes a little bit further from this grassroots level, because to me, because I also worked in Congresswoman Norton's office as an intern, and so I'm very passionate about this situation. And I knew about Congresswoman Norton's, the way DC's, like, we're not able to do the same, have the same amount of representation just as other states. It was just kind of weird, and it's kind of sad that we're just a lot like how we were back before America got its right and branched off from Britain. And so this is kind of like, it's kind of sad. And I also just wanted to say that I hope we can just move forward from here.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, John Capozzi. John Capozzi here. John Capozzi. Thought I saw John. Is John Capozzi not here?
I saw him too, yeah.
Okay. John Capozzi, Jean, is he out in the hallway? Okay. Anish Jenkins. And Anish will be followed by Laura Fuchs. Okay.
I'm not going to read all.
Okay.
I want to thank the mayor. I want to thank the commission. I want to thank everyone for being here. We need statehood. We deserve statehood. We do everything that any citizen in this country does, and we are not real citizens until we achieve DC statehood. We're going to fight for it. We're going to continue to put all our energies and our belief in it, and statehood will be the end result of all our efforts. And I'm with Stand Up for Democracy and DC Coalition, which we have been fighting for statehood since 1997. I want to say that it's good to see a different method being presented. We want to make sure that statehood is always on the agenda, that no half measures like a one vote or just budget autonomy is discussed. That's out. This is now statehood only. I do want to continue to voice my concerns, which I just heard earlier from the future law student at UDC, that there are not enough people being informed about this process. I'm very concerned that there is not enough of the DC government resources being put forward to reach out to the people to make sure that this is a real constitutional convention. I'm glad that there are more people than I have seen. However, most of the people that have testified thus far, I have seen testify before, including myself, because we believe in it. I do want to thank the DC statehood delegation, particularly Franklin Garcia, for this flyer. I want everybody to go to, when you go to the polls tomorrow to support your candidate, let the people who you talk to, let them know that this is going on. It may not be enough time to get people out. We may need more time to discuss this to the people in our neighborhoods and our community. We may need to extend this process to make it a real democratic process. If we're saying that this is the perfect time because we're going to have a Democratic president, that president will serve 4 years. If we think that we're going to have a House and Senate that might support it, that House and Senate will be there for at least 2 years. But we really need to reach out to the people. How many people here are from Ward 8? Raise your hands. How many people? We have 2. How many people? 3. How many people here are from Ward 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7? Okay, we need to reach out to our community. We need to get people involved, and the legislation is too small. There's no state that would have 13 people representing almost 3/4 of 1 million people. So I want to thank again the fact that this is happening. We got to go for statehood, but we have to do it right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Laura Fuchs. And Laura will be followed by Talia Rhodes.
Hi, good evening. As a history and government teacher in DC Public Schools, it is my job to lead young citizens in a deep analysis of the history of our country and Washington, D.C. In my advanced placement government class, I teach the importance of legal language, the legislative process, and my students and I all know that a convention is different than a town hall. And a delegate is different than a citizen. Democracy has to have real meaning, and if we change these terms to suit our purposes, we're doing a disservice to history. We cannot rush this process. The term popular sovereignty has to have meaning. We deserve a voice and a vote in our local government as well as in the national. And we cannot sacrifice the local government just to get statehood. Excuse me. In my government classes in Ward 7, it is important for me to go above and beyond to get my students to engage beyond simply voting, which is why I've been everywhere with my students at all of these events. This is challenging work, and it is made even more challenging because our government is so small. With only 13 legislatures, we have a limited access to our politicians, and it makes it very easy to ignore us, and they do. And when we elect new people, they ignore us. And if we continue to ignore our residents by not giving them enough voting representation in their own local government, I do not believe it matters if we have statehood, because our local laws still will not reflect the people in this state. So we have to have a larger legislative branch. And if the initiative process does not include the ability to amend the Constitution, then we're not going to get a second draft that expands the legislature, because our own elected government will not give up the power it is being granted in a Constitution. So our initiative process has to allow for constitutional amendments, or we can talk about it next time. We need to change the way we amend this Constitution. It is not enough to be truly equal to every state just by getting a vote in Congress. We have to be equal to every state in the way we run our local government. And if we sacrifice that in the name of perfection, I don't think that's perfection. I don't think that's asking too much to change it, at least a little bit, to look more like other states. So I believe that for our students and for a future government that is accountable to them, we have to expand the legislature. We have to look more like an actual state when we become a state, and it's not enough to tell us that we can just do that later. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fuchs. Talia Rhodes.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I came here to talk about fairness in education since I'm a 10th grader at H.T. Woodson. Earlier last week, actually, I went to a Educational Alliance meeting, and it didn't seem as though it was fair to the students nor the teachers. It's easy to sit on a high chair and tell people to do stuff and then tell them that they're wrong when they don't do it the way you feel like they're doing it. And then it's easy to tell someone to do something and act like it's supportive, act like it's for everybody when it's not. I'm a result of what you choose. I'm a result of what changes you make. So in the end, it's not just having a bunch of, and no disrespect, having a lot of adults in the room just pick the future of the young people in this community. And I am a young person in this community, and I go to school with a lot of people in this community. I play games against a lot of people in this community. I see a lot of people in the community. And if you have people in the community, and not just people who have lived here for over 50, 60 years, it's people who's been here for 10 years, because that's how old they are. People who's been for 15 years, that's how old I am, even though I haven't been here for 15 years. I was born here and left because my mom thought it would be a better opportunity for her. But it wasn't, and when she came back, I feel like it's not a better opportunity for me, because school is everything to me. And when I go to school, I feel unfair, and I feel like what's put in place for me is what you think I should do, and not what I think I should do. I want my future to be based on what I feel like I want to do, and not someone telling my teachers to teach me a certain way when knowing I don't learn that certain way. I don't want teachers to be frustrated because I can't learn this certain way, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. Fairness is everything to me, and for things to be unfair is the worst possible thing, especially when you're trying to be a state. I came from a state last summer, and it felt fair to me until I came to the District of Columbia, and fairness left the window. So that's what I have to say about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your testimony, dear. And I'm trying to figure which one of our staff is going to follow up with you about what concern you have at school. Okay? Who can do that? Staff. Is Sharon here? Thank you. Let's move. Thanks. Okay. Royal Height. Followed by Guy Durant.
Hi.
I'd like to say good evening to everyone present, including our Honorable Mayor, all the honorees are here. And I'd just like to say that my name is Royal Height. Call me the Music Ambassador for a number of reasons. But I had the pleasure of being a member of Stand Up Free DC, and I am their official music ambassador, and I might add, at the march in Washington, D.C. back in 2013, I was honored to present to the city of Washington, D.C. a song entitled Taxation Without Representation, and I performed it all over the city, and we are proposing to have it to be moved as an official theme song for Statehood for D.C., and I think sometimes the words are a lot better than talking. It can't be right for everyone else, but wrong for you and me. Everywhere in the USA except Washington, D.C. We even go as far to fight for voting rights and democracy around the world and overlook our nation's capital. More than a century, we ain't been heard. There's something wrong with taxation. Without representation is wrong. Let me hear you say taxation without representation. How long, long, long? We pay taxes, obey law like everyone else. So tell me, why can't we vote? The only city in this nation without a voice, and that's no joke. For much too long we've been overlooked. It's not fair for all that we do, and expect us not to be discontent when the problem is really you, really you.
All right.
And that's part of the song, but that essentially says that's the heartbeat of what's happening here in D.C. I'm a native Washingtonian. I graduated from McKinley High School, Howard University with honors, and for more than 60 years, I have watched parents that couldn't vote, representatives who represented our city who had no right to say anything on our behalf, and until we change that, it will still be wrong. So again, we are supporting that. My name again, Royal Height, the music ambassador. God bless all of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So Guy Durant, and Guy will be followed by Lee Aiken.
Thank you. My name is Guy Durant, and you almost hate to follow that. That was really great. I really enjoyed that song. I also live in Ward 5, and I'm a native Washingtonian. I also went to Woodrow Wilson. So
Please try to speak into the microphone, Guy.
Okay. And just wanted to go over a few facts since we're supposed to be talking about the legislative branch and also the referendum process. I wanted to focus on that and just talk about a few facts that may or may not have been covered in the public comments. I know I sent in my public comments, and I appreciate everybody that's given public comments. Mark Plotkin was right. Josh Birch was right. Everybody who spoke was right. Our legislature is way too small. But let me also thank those who are working on trying to get this Constitution done. Thank you to the mayor. Thank you to Senator Paul Strauss, Senator Brown, Chairman Mendelson, Representative Garcia. And behind the scenes, Ms. Beverly Perry and everybody on the commission, Ms. Anita Bonds, everybody, appreciate all you guys. And I also bring greetings from Plymouth Congregational United Church of Christ, Reverend Braylon Hagler, senior pastor, where we're taught you should always speak truth to power. Our government is way too small, and I just want to read a few facts. So, D.C. deserves a revolution and not a de-evolution in self-governance. There should be power to the people, not the status quo. We need to give voting rights, finally, to the ANCs as part of a bicameral government. Only Nebraska has a single body, what they call a unicameral legislature. 3 states were initially established with unicameral legislatures: Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Vermont. All 3 switched to a bicameral system by 1830. There were no unicameral legislatures in the United States until Nebraska switched from a bicameral system in 1934. And you can go online and search the history of Nebraska unicameralism. And like I said, they're the only one still left. Other states have considered adopting this model in the succeeding decades, yet Nebraska remains the sole single-body legislature in the nation. So in other words, people, there's 49 states that are bicameral. We're the only one proposing a unicameral besides Nebraska. Bicameral government is the norm in most of the 50 states. A House and Senate, sometimes other names are used at the state level, pass laws, and the governor signs the laws. This proposed new state still acts like a city council, and we have no checks on the new state government. Let's act like a state by turning the elected 40 ANC chairs into our second voting body. I would call them the Assembly Neighborhood Congress chairs, or the ANCC. I know that doesn't yet give every ANC commissioner a vote, but I would support the ANCC to include all ANC commissioners sometime in the future. Right now, we have an oligarchy of 13 that needs only a septarchy or heptarchy of 7 to rule. It is much easier to corrupt only 7 state legislators than 53 state legislatures, which is what I'm proposing, a 13-member Senate plus 40 ANCC voting members. We need to expand our state government and be bicameral so the power is decentralized and distributed back to neighborhoods. D.C. has more people than Wyoming and Vermont and is close to the population of North Dakota, Alaska, with larger legislatures. And by the way, no state, not even Nebraska, none of them have less than 49 voting legislatures. And we're closer to the 5. And let me just tell you, North Dakota, which is close to our population, has 141 voting legislatures. Vermont has 180 voting legislatures. Wyoming, 90. Alaska has 60. The smallest legislature is Nebraska. Do you want to be the smallest voting body in America? I don't think so.
Thank you, Mr. Durant. Ms. Aiken, and Ms. Aiken will be followed by Hector Rodriguez.
Hello, citizens of D.C., and hopefully sometime soon congressional voting citizens as well. I came to Washington, D.C. the day after I made my first and only congressional vote where I was at the University of Iowa. I voted for President Kennedy, and I voted for our congressman. Then I came to D.C., and I was shocked to discover I couldn't vote for the president or a congressman. We eventually corrected the fact that we could have a president and a vice presidential vote, but I have regretted that we cannot vote on how our rather large contribution of cash to the federal government actually gets spent. We contribute more than almost any other unity in the country, and we should have our fair share. In fact, I have often wondered why some courageous soul, and I'm afraid I'm not quite that courageous, does not set up an escrow account of 3/5 of all the taxes we pay to the federal government until we actually have a congressional vote, and hold that money until they give it to us. Secondly, with regard to various proposals, I like Douglas Commonwealth. I recently visited Frederick Douglass's house. I was very impressed by everything I saw there. If you have not visited, you really ought to go and see it. That man had breadth of vision and was active and working for all the good things that we believe in all his life, and that would certainly be a great honor. I also very much approve the idea of a of a large legislature and probably a bicameral legislature. I'm running for at-large city council under the DC Statehood Green Party. I have attended a number of events and participated in forums. I was recently at a Ward 8 forum, and I was very favorably impressed by the 3 Ward 8 candidates who were questioned there and gave very interesting answers. I think we have a wonderful breadth of vision of people who could participate in a legislature as delegates and senators, and I certainly hope that they would have this chance. I think it would make for a much stronger and better government. We do not have to repeat the pattern we've had of 7 people being able to decide everything for us, and if the mayor has all of those 7 people in her pocket or his pocket, then that becomes a monopoly, and we do not need that. We also do not need to have our elected attorney general under the power of the governor. That should continue to be an independent focus for people who are not happy with the existing situation. So I very much want statehood. I'm Statehood Green Party. I'm strongly for statehood. I always have been. I have always resented the fact that I could not vote for congressman. I thought I just saw a 2 up there. Okay, anyway, thank you, people.
Thank
and
you.
Include the environment. That's
Thank you. Thank you. Hector Rodriguez. And Hector will be followed by Ann Lackow, and Mary Emanuel will have the final word.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hector Rodriguez, and I am the chairman of the National Latino Alliance for DC Statehood. For short, we call it Latinos for DC Statehood. Today, though, I'm not talking to you as a Latino. I'm talking to you mainly as a proud Washingtonian, a proud member and resident of the District of Columbia. I'm also speaking to you as a veteran who commanded American soldiers during the Vietnam era and came back to Washington, D.C. and lost his franchise. I could not have any representation in our Congress of the United States. How many veterans do we have here today? All right, we need to get the veterans moving. This is our fight because we have fought for this country and we are not represented in the Congress of the United States. You know, some people say, well, Hector, you never had black hair, but actually I started in this movement when my hair was black, and someday I'm going to present for the commission a picture that I did have black hair. But the fact is that there's a lot of work that has been done on statehood. But I have never seen our movement as invigorated as it is now under the leadership of our mayor and this commission. And I want them to have a round of applause on this. Okay. Now, some people, there are recommendations that we need to make to our Constitution, but let us not throw the baby out with the wash. Keep an eye on the prize. And that is freedom for our people. Freedom. Even our federal Constitution is not perfect. If it was, we would be here, would we? Okay. So I want to make a recommendation to you that we get the veterans moving on this. And also, I want the moral power of our churches. I see our churches need to be behind us on this, and we need that great moral power that has always been in front of our moral movement, and statehood is a moral imperative for all the people. And lastly, I'll close by saying, someone said that our theme is add another star. And I like that. But the star of Washington, D.C. is going to be the shining star of freedom. Let's make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. And Lackow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Ann Lyko. I'm a fifth-generation Washingtonian, had a great-grandfather who spoke out against how dastardly we were speaking for Congress back in the 1880s. I've been involved in the statehood movement, the modern statehood movement, from the beginning when I was introduced to it by Sam Smith. And I've been involved as a citizen in our local government as long as we've had our current home rule government, and was one of the first ANC commissioners. I would like to thank the mayor for her passion on this issue, and I heard her recently when she spoke to the platform committee of the Democratic Convention. We do need statehood, and everybody should understand that what it is the state is that fundamental union of sovereignty that gives you all your rights under our federal Constitution. It's not just a vote in Congress or anything like that. It's everything comes from being a citizen of a state, and what we're asking for is the right to self-government and the right to liberty. I am concerned about the process we're going through right now, that the Constitutional Convention, as a couple of speakers have mentioned, is really not a convention. We're here more as a town meeting or a hearing, and we really need to have a real constitution to update the constitutions. We have two previous ones, one that was ratified by the citizens in 1982. And I think what we should be working for is having a referendum to reaffirm that we want statehood, and then electing delegates to a real constitutional convention to be held in 2017, where we would have significant amount of time to actually have the citizens involved and voting and discussing all these issues. The issues of the legislature, as many people have mentioned, it is much too small, and I've looked at all the statistics on every legislature in the country. We do need a much larger one. The 40-person one that was proposed in 1982 makes a lot more sense and puts us in the ballpark in terms of the number of people represented as those of the smaller states in the union right now. In fact, it's only, I think, 2 states that have people being represented in their upper house more than our large members would be representing under this Constitution, and only 9 states that where a legislator represents more than the ward members or the other 8 would be under this Constitution. The other thing that I want to mention that hasn't been mentioned by anybody else is, for this to be successful, we have to put our money where our mouth is, and it's the one thing we have not done over the last 40 years. And I would urge the mayor and the council to appropriate, reprogram some money immediately to do a major education program for the city and for the nation, and to actually really fund our statehood delegations so that they can have the resources to actually do the job that we've been electing them to do since 1990. I have a whole slew of comments which I've passed out to the members, and I can publish or give them to anybody else. But there are a lot of things missing in this Constitution.
Thank you, Ms. Lykow. We do have your written
and just one final comment. Everybody go to the website and read the 1982 Constitution. You will be surprised how many things are better written, more complete, and are things that you want to know and that are missing in the draft before us right now.
Thank you. Mary Emanuel. Let's see. I have the final 4, and he's on it.
Good evening, Mayor Bowser,
Good evening.
members of the council, fellow citizens, and Mayor, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for providing us with this forum.
Thank you. If
to
you
make
would
our
speak
comments.
into the microphone, ma'am, so
Yes, I
everybody
will.
can hear you.
Okay. I'm going to make my comments fairly brief. I'm here for self-determination. I assume everyone in this room is here for self-determination. It's kind of hard to be against it, isn't it? I think it's an inalienable right as life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and I think certainly everybody in this room and in the District of Columbia has the right to that. My comments may vary a little bit. I'm not on any particular one theme. There was a gentleman earlier today who made reference to the fact that President Obama only 4 years ago put a taxation without representation sticker on White House vehicles. And I don't know if the gentleman is still here, but I'd like to know how many previous presidents put one on at all. Okay, well then there's a lot of other presidents, aren't there? So I think 2, as opposed to all the rest who did not do it. I think President Obama is certainly to be admired for that and not criticized. As far as the name Douglas Commonwealth, I like that name very much. I like the fact that it incorporates D.C. What I don't like about it is that it's the we have a Commonwealth already. It's the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. And I think the District of Columbia has waited long enough to have something that's entirely unique to the district. I'll throw my particular suggestion in the ring, which is justice. I think that's pretty appropriate because that's what we're looking for. And so why not have a state called Justice? The other name I put out there was Capital State because we are the nation's capital. So why not Capital State? And that takes care of your zip codes and state abbreviations and all of that. So that's my comment on that. My other remark, and I don't see Mr. Eric Shaw in the room, so Mayor, if somebody can probably get an answer to me on this question of how the district is going to be divided up, and to me it sounded like the district was being cut up if this ever happens. And I know that there are certainly federal buildings probably in every state in the United States, so I'm not sure why the federal buildings should be an exception as being part of the District of Columbia. So that's a question I'd like to have addressed. And again, the New Columbia, my objections are probably the same as much of the other speakers. Columbus was not one of my heroes. If I'm going to look at my historical heroes. And as far as I'm concerned, he was a gentleman who probably could have used GPS technology because he certainly did not discover America. And that's pretty much my comments for the evening. Thank you very much.
Ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So I was just handed a list. These are the final 5 speakers in the public comment period. John Capozzi.
Thank you. Mayor Bowser, Chairman Mendelson, and distinguished statehood delegation. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify briefly tonight. Just have a few brief comments. I do like the idea of expanding representation, using some kind of population number to figure out how many representatives we have would be the fairest way to do that, to expand that. I will go into the funding thing briefly because I think that is critical, but I actually came up with an idea that might not cost the government anything, which is if the statehood delegation were considered employees of the district government, like I am right now at the Office of the Chief Technology Officer, then someone like myself could donate their annual leave to that individual. And then that way they could use that as compensation either to pay for what they need to be doing or, however they saw fit to help us in the statehood movement. So that might be an idea that we can look at in terms of being able to designate them and then look at the employees of the D.C. government to donate their leave for that. And then I mentioned a couple brief things. The Democratic convention that's coming up in Philadelphia, I want to urge everyone to attend that convention. It's right in Philadelphia. It couldn't be any closer unless it was here in the city. We're looking at possibly doing an event at the Betsy Ross House because then we could ask her to sew the 51st star on the flag, which seems to be one of the themes. And then also, I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but I really was encouraged by Patrick Mara being here and the Republican Party. And I do want to urge everyone, including myself, and after 19 years on the State Committee, I feel free to say this. We need to encourage the Republicans here in this city to get more involved. I mean, we're not going to be able to do it without them, but I think we need to think about it. Don't tell Hillary or Bernie I said that, but I definitely want to mention that as an option. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to come before you tonight. I urge everyone to consider, recommitting to this cause. I think we've got a great chance between now and the election. The Congress could turn over. It could be our chance to do this. Obviously, with the president being elected, who's going to be a supporter of statehood, that's an exciting opportunity for us as well. And don't underestimate Donald Trump. I think if we can use him to gain more recognition for this statehood movement, I think we should consider that. Thank you.
All right. Okay, Donald Haynes. And Mr. Haynes will be followed by Leno Struzzi.
Since everyone's having problems with the mic, I hope this is okay. I want to confine my remarks to the topics of tonight. First, on the Bill of Rights. The provisions of the Bill of Rights have an equal justice section, guaranteeing equal justice of law, but there's no due process section, a clear oversight, the kind of drafting error I think that just ought to happen. But I want to address the comment that we shouldn't duplicate the federal Bill of Rights. Many state constitutions have what are called an independent and adequate state ground. So the definition of our freedom of religion is not necessarily the same definition as the federal government. A federal government whose definition, for example, of free speech is limited by those justices appointed by many presidents we never voted for. So we should keep in the federal Bill of Rights at ours, and I support all of the ones that were suggested, the free speech. Secondly, on the legislation, many state governors use the line item veto as a way to intimidate legislatures, saying, you back my general bill or my line item veto in the budget will be used to kill a project dear to your constituents. That's a new grant of power to the governor/mayor here, and without any justification. If we want to do that, we can do that later. There's no reason it should be in the Constitution. Secondly, on initiative and referendum, the Constitution already proposes that you can't have an initiative that would have the effect of authorizing discrimination. We should have a similar limitation on referenda, so that if we have an anti-gay group, say, that wants to do a referendum on transgender bathrooms, that you don't do that. We don't put up civil rights in this city to popular vote. So we ought to have the same provision with regard to that. I want to talk about the boundary issue, because I really applaud the last speaker about the boundary. Obviously, there's the CIA and the Pentagon. Talk about national department headquarters. The Pentagon is in Virginia. It's very important that we be very careful about the boundaries. It's important, on the one hand, that we leave a common core, to use a term, that allows us to say there's still a District of Columbia that's a federal enclave. But if we do it too much, we rob the future of our ability to sustain ourselves. And specifically, this goes to the federal triangle. There's no reason why, if Social Security Administration, one of the most important agencies in the government, can be in Baltimore, and the CIA in Virginia, that we can't have federal entities in the District of Columbia still being federal. Finally, I want to suggest that when we get to the constitutional amendment process, the idea of putting in the Constitution the idea we're going to have in 5 years or whatever, a full-blown constitutional convention sounds like a reasonable thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Haynes. Mr. Shizuzzi.
First, I'd like to thank Governor Bowser, Speaker Mendelson, and the rest of the board for everything they're doing. I do think that was a good suggestion to make there, to start addressing you in a different manner. It's really important. I'm Natalia Stracuzzi, or Natalino Stracuzzi, and if you can't say Stracuzzi, remember Stracuzzi like jacuzzi. Easy enough to make it sound right? All right. I'd like to know, when are they going to come out with the first draft that we'll be able to look over it? May 1st, I was at the first meeting, and I'm curious when the draft will come out that we'll be able to inspect what changes would be made to it in that aspect. Do we know anything of that factor when we'll see a draft of the first Constitution?
You have the first draft.
Yeah, but I thought it was going to be amended of some sort before it happened.
Well, the commission will consider the comments
right.
and further amendments.
Also, I look at the District of Columbia, like I look at Italy. The capital of Italy, Rome. You look at the Vatican, it is the heart of Italy, which is the capital, and that is D.C., our federal enclave, as the Vatican is its own sovereign nation. So everything in that federal enclave, I think, should be called the District of Columbia, and everything out of that enclave should be Washington, D.C., our 51st state. This will save us much money. It'll keep Congress happy, because we're not going to have to change the name, so we should consider that, because I do love our name, Washington, D.C. Then I look at our voter districts are easy enough to set up through our ANCs. If we take 3 ANC groups and we merge them together, that'll be one voter district, roughly about 30,000. We might have to change some of the numbers to make 25. So that we have a House-only system that'll save the money, taxpayer money, by hiring all these people to work there, and it'll also give other parties opportunity to be able to elect it, like the Statehood Greens, which I am, or the Republicans and such, because if we break down these voter districts into smaller groups, that means that other parties will be part of this system, and that's what we need to be inclusive in the District of Columbia. And lastly, I like to touch on the fact of, I really think that we need to have an amendment part of our Constitution after a 5-year period. We are going to be a new government. Things are going to be changing. We're going to be learning, and we're going to have to implement those changes in that period. So this would be something that should be drafted into the documentation based on the fact that that way it will give us an opportunity to change as we grow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shakuzi. Peter Espenshire. And the final is J.R. McDonald after Mr. Espenshire.
I respect Michael Brown's injunction that we avoid the possibility of insisting on the perfect and sacrificing the good. However, I think that there are a few things which are so essential that they need to be corrected, I guess is the word. One of them is about the legislature. Several people have addressed this in various ways. I think that the most important thing, in addition to having a much larger legislature than what's prescribed, is to have a bicameral legislature. And I don't think anybody mentioned that the single exception to that in the country, Nebraska, with their unicameral legislature, is prescribed in their constitution to be nonpartisan, which is a very different animal from what we have. I think that the presence of bicameral legislatures is so nearly universal, not only in this country among nearly all the states, but in republics all over the world. It is rare to find any unicameral legislature. And there are a lot of good reasons for that. I'm not going to expand on that, but anybody who's been through a political science course knows that it's a very important reason to have a bicameral legislature. But it also needs to be larger. And I think that the smaller of the two bodies in our prospective bicameral legislature should still be larger than our 13-member council is. And that gets me to the other major point that I don't want to let go unnoticed. The whole idea of prescribing a shift in the course of becoming a state from the council's structure that we have into essentially an identical legislative body, composed, in fact, of all the same people, is a nest feathering process of profound proportions. And I think we should be paying attention. The new state should have a new legislature elected from scratch by the people who are citizens of that state. And the idea of a carryover, I think, is just a basically corrupting process. There are many other things that need to be fixed. I think that providing for environmental provisions in the Constitution is a good thing, and many other people have addressed some of these important things. Thank you.
Thank you. J.R. McDonald.
Hello, I promise to be very brief. It's ironic that I'm the last speaker because I'm probably one of the newest DC folks here. I'm a resident. I recently got my green card, and I will be a United States citizen in the future, God willing. I just want to contrast between the mention of a militia in the Bill of Rights and the lack of mention of open data and right to information and right to data. There's an international movement to give citizens information about what their officials are doing. There is some reference to openness and transparency in the document, but it would be really powerful, I think, to have more reference to open data, particularly in the area of contracting data. If the government's going to be spending $1 billion in procurement, then it would be a good idea to know exactly what they're spending the money on, rather than sort of the older, more old-fashioned way of sort of bouncing data between the House or between the legislature and the executive. It'd be nice to have some rights around data so that the citizens of New Columbia can arm themselves with information and data rather than muskets. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Well, I want to thank everybody for their participation tonight, and I want to acknowledge that we've been joined by Councilmember Anita Bonds, who is also the chair of the DC Democrats. Councilmember, do you have any parting words? You can also be on the agenda on Friday or Saturday, but any...
Thank you. I did come to make a few comments.
Okay.
If possible.
A few.
Yes, very, very few. Oh, no.
Yes, thank
no.
you.
This is sort of, well, firstly, good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Councilmember.
And certainly thank you all for coming out. I see many faces I've seen before, and I know that this is dearly important to us. Some of us who have older faces have been at this a long time. And we're very committed to this, and I can tell because I see so many older faces, and I know that this is precious to you. And like many of the speakers before me, I just want to really commend Mayor Bowser. You don't know it, but she's a younger person, so she has a younger face. But she's been at this for a while, too. And she really feels very strongly that the time has come. And you know, in politics, you have to hit the iron while it's hot. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. And so I just wanted you to see this because these pages are representative of the Democratic Party platform as it is today. And it's loaded with ideas and proposals and processes for making life better for the people of America. Now, 3/4 of the measures, say for foreign policy, are actions that are taken by states. States that have sovereign rights afforded to them and to the people of their region. They can make any law that they like and not to have a worry from what Congress might say, which is so different for us in the District of Columbia. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm sure if Congresswoman Norton were here, she would tell you, listen, whatever it is that's in the contents of our little book, it's got to be better than what we are living with today. And so I'm here to try and echo that sentiment and say to you, and I know there are many questions and many ideas, but let's get on with it, because this is about the District of Columbia that may become Douglas Commonwealth, or it may become New Columbia, or it may become some other name ultimately. But we really need to get on with this process. We have a chance now to really make a difference and to show it at the ballot box. And so I am asking you to do more than just talk about it and, you know, moan some of the things that you don't like. And many of us want things to be better, more expansive, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the big deal today is to embrace the fact that we're going to have a constitution and we're on the road to becoming a state. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you. Once again, I want to thank everybody for their participation this first night in our democracy speeches. Weren't our democracy speakers fantastic? Give them a round of applause. And while we accepted all kinds of comments today, this session was specifically to talk about the Article 1 and Article 6. And on Friday, the focus will be Article 2, which is focused on the executive, and Councilmember Mendelson will lead that discussion, and Article 4 on the budget and financial management and on borrowing. The final day of the convention will be June 18th. The commission will direct the support staff, everybody who is supporting us, after we have received all of the comments, to see when we will be able to convene again to discuss any amendments. That meeting will be in public. The target date is the last week in June, and we will make that meeting that date publicly available as soon as possible. We are also have on the website, if you haven't seen it already, all of the comments that have come in to this point, and they are organized by article. So you will see that a lot, as you heard tonight, a lot of the comments can be categorized into several buckets, and you will find them on the website now. And we will add to this spreadsheet with each day that goes by. We expect that the legal committee will make some recommendations around the comments that are here, and that will inform the discussion among the commissioners. So you don't have to come back on Friday unless you still have more comments about the executive, but you are welcome to, because we're going to have another exciting slate of democracy speakers. So with that, for the night, we're adjourned.